History remembers the rise of empires, the battles, the conquering kings, the armies marching across burning cities. But history rarely tells the darker truth that followed those victories. When empires fell, it was often the women who paid the highest price. Queens who once ruled palaces suddenly became prisoners of war. Princesses raised to inherit thrones were turned into political trophies. Royal brides, forced into marriages meant to erase entire bloodlines. Across ancient Rome, the Mongol Empire, and countless forgotten kingdoms, conquest did not end when the battlefield fell silent. For many women, that was only the beginning. Tonight, we uncover the hidden history most chronicles tried to ignore. The story of what truly happened to royal women when empires collapsed. When historians describe the fall of empires, they often focus on generals, kings, and the thunder of armies colliding on distant battlefields. But behind every fallen kingdom existed another story, one rarely written in official chronicles. The story of its women. When a city surrendered or a kingdom collapsed, the fate of royal women was rarely decided by mercy. Instead, their future became part of the conqueror's strategy. Queens were more than rulers' wives. They represented the legitimacy of dynasties. They carried royal bloodlines that symbolized the authority of entire nations. And because of that, conquering empires understood something very important. Controlling the women of a defeated dynasty meant controlling the future of that kingdom. Sometimes the fate of these women was humiliation. In ancient Rome, victorious generals paraded defeated rulers through the streets during grand triumphs. Captured royalty were displayed as living symbols of Rome's dominance. The crowds cheered. The empire celebrated. But for the women forced to march through those streets, the triumph meant the destruction of everything they had once known. Other times, the fate of royal women became political. Instead of execution, they were forced into marriages with conquerors or loyal generals. These unions were not about love. They were about power. By marrying a captured princess, a conqueror could claim legitimacy over the land he had just seized. Through bloodlines, conquest could be transformed into rule. This strategy appeared across civilizations. In medieval Europe, royal daughters were married to rivals to secure peace. In Asia, imperial courts often absorbed foreign princesses after conquest. And among nomadic empires like the Mongols, marriage alliances helped expand control across vast territories. Yet beneath the politics and strategy existed the personal reality. For many women, the fall of their kingdom meant losing their identity overnight. A queen could become a captive. A princess could become a bargaining tool. A royal court could vanish in a matter of days. Yet despite these hardships, many of these women displayed remarkable resilience. Some adapted to foreign courts. Some used diplomacy and intelligence to protect their children. Others quietly influenced politics from behind palace walls. Their stories rarely appeared in the official records written by conquering empires. But modern historians increasingly recognize their importance. Because conquest did not only reshape borders. It reshaped families. It reshaped dynasties. And sometimes, the survival of a defeated kingdom depended not on its fallen king, but on the women who endured after the empire collapsed. When a powerful empire defeated a rival kingdom, victory was rarely quiet. It was celebrated with spectacle. The conquering rulers wanted the world to see their dominance, and nothing symbolized that victory more powerfully than the capture of a defeated dynasty. Among the most powerful symbols were royal women. Queens, princesses, and noble daughters were often taken alive, not out of mercy, but because their survival served a purpose. They became living proof that a once powerful kingdom had fallen. One of the most famous traditions of displaying conquered rulers occurred in ancient Rome. After a successful campaign, a victorious general was sometimes granted a magnificent celebration known as a triumph. During this grand procession, captured enemies were marched through the streets of the capital before thousands of cheering citizens. The streets were filled with gold, exotic animals, and treasures taken from conquered lands. But the most dramatic moment often came when defeated leaders and their families were forced to walk through the crowds. Royal women were sometimes included in these humiliating displays. For them, the experience was devastating. Only months earlier, they may have ruled over vast territories, commanding servants and living within luxurious palaces. Now they stood in chains before a foreign empire that celebrated their defeat. Yet humiliation was only one possible fate. In many cases, conquered queens and princesses were absorbed into the political systems of the victors. Marriage was one of the most powerful tools of empire. A captured princess could be forced into marriage with a conquering king, a prince, or a powerful general. Such unions were not about romance or family alliances in the traditional sense. They were about control. By marrying a royal woman from a defeated dynasty, the conqueror could claim legitimacy over the conquered land. To the local population, the message was clear. The bloodline of their former rulers had now merged with the new regime. Resistance became harder when the conqueror could claim a connection to the old royal family. This strategy appeared across countless civilizations. In medieval Europe, dynasties often arranged marriages between rival kingdoms to prevent future wars. In parts of Asia, imperial courts incorporated foreign princesses into the royal household after conquest. And among steppe empires, such marriages strengthened alliances across vast territories. But behind the political calculations, these women faced enormous personal loss. They had watched their fathers fall in battle, their brothers imprisoned, their kingdoms disappear. And now their lives were controlled by the very empire responsible for that destruction. Yet many of these women demonstrated extraordinary strength. Some became influential figures within their new courts. Some protected their children and ensured the survival of their royal bloodlines. Others quietly navigated the dangerous world of palace politics. History often remembers the conquerors who seized power. But the women forced into these roles lived in a far more complicated reality. They were symbols of defeat. But sometimes, they also became unexpected survivors. And in rare cases, they even shaped the future of the empires that conquered them. Throughout history, conquest did not always end with destruction. Sometimes, it ended with a wedding. When empires expanded, their rulers quickly realized that controlling land was only part of the challenge. Maintaining that control required legitimacy, a way to convince conquered populations that the new rulers had a rightful claim to power. And one of the most effective tools for achieving this was marriage. Royal women from defeated dynasties were often forced into political unions with the very leaders who had destroyed their kingdoms. These marriages were not about love. They were about strategy. A princess who once represented the pride of her homeland could suddenly become the bridge between two rival worlds. To the conquerors, marrying a defeated queen or princess offered powerful advantages. It helped stabilize newly conquered territories and reduced the likelihood of rebellion. If the conqueror could claim connection to the old royal bloodline, many subjects might accept the new rule more easily. In this way, a single marriage could reshape the future of an entire kingdom. But for the women involved, the reality was deeply complex. Imagine growing up inside a royal palace, surrounded by family, tradition, and a culture that had existed for generations. Then imagine watching that world collapse. Your city falls. Your kingdom disappears. And soon after, you are told that your future lies beside the very ruler responsible for that destruction. For many royal women, this was the harsh reality of imperial politics. Yet history also reveals something remarkable. Many of these women refused to remain powerless. Instead, they adapted. Within foreign courts, royal brides sometimes used their intelligence and diplomatic skills to influence decisions behind the scenes. Because they understood the customs and concerns of their homeland, they could act as intermediaries between conquerors and conquered populations. Their voices often carried weight in matters of governance. Some queens managed to secure better treatment for their people. Others protected members of their defeated families from execution or exile. And some even played important roles in shaping the policies of powerful empires. In many ancient societies, royal women also held influence within palace networks that outsiders rarely understood. Servants, advisors, and noble families often formed alliances that quietly shaped political outcomes. A queen who appeared powerless in public might still wield considerable influence within the private world of the royal court. Over time, children born from these marriages created new dynasties. These heirs carried blood from both conqueror and conquered. Through them, the old kingdom did not entirely vanish. Instead, it was absorbed into the empire that replaced it. If the conqueror could claim connection to the old royal bloodline, many subjects might accept the new rule more easily. In this way, a single marriage could reshape the future of an entire kingdom. But for the women involved, the reality was deeply complex. Imagine growing up inside a royal palace, surrounded by family, tradition, and a culture that had existed for generations. Then imagine watching that world collapse. Your city falls. Your kingdom disappears. And soon after, you are told that your future lies beside the very ruler responsible for that destruction. For many royal women, this was the harsh reality of imperial politics. Yet history also reveals something remarkable. Many of these women refused to remain powerless. Instead, they adapted. Within foreign courts, royal brides sometimes used their intelligence and diplomatic skills to influence decisions behind the scenes. Because they understood the customs and concerns of their homeland, they could act as intermediaries between conquerors and conquered populations. Their voices often carried weight in matters of governance. Some queens managed to secure better treatment for their people. Others protected members of their defeated families from execution or exile. And some even played important roles in shaping the policies of powerful empires. In many ancient societies, royal women also held influence within palace networks that outsiders rarely understood. Servants, advisors, and noble families often formed alliances that quietly shaped political outcomes. A queen who appeared powerless in public might still wield considerable influence within the private world of the royal court. Over time, children born from these marriages created new dynasties. These heirs carried blood from both conqueror and conquered. Through them, the old kingdom did not entirely vanish. Instead, it was absorbed into the empire that replaced it. This blending of bloodlines happened across centuries and across continents. Empires expanded. Dynasties fell. But the royal women who lived through these transformations often became the hidden architects of a new political order. Their lives were shaped by conquest, but their resilience helped shape the future that followed. For royal women captured during conquest, survival did not end when the war was over. In many ways, their real struggle was only beginning. Once brought into the courts of conquering empires, these women entered a world that was both powerful and dangerous. Imperial courts were places of luxury and influence, but they were also filled with rivalry, suspicion, and political intrigue. For a foreign queen or princess, every step had to be taken carefully. She was no longer surrounded by loyal family members or trusted advisors from her homeland. Instead, she lived among nobles who often viewed her with curiosity, or even hostility. Some saw her as a reminder of a defeated enemy. Others saw her as a valuable political connection. In many royal courts, a captured princess was placed within the ruler's household, sometimes becoming a wife, a concubine, or part of the extended royal family. While this position could provide security and status, it also meant navigating the complicated hierarchy of palace life. Royal courts were rarely peaceful places. Power struggles unfolded quietly behind elaborate walls. Noble families competed for influence. Advisors whispered strategies to rulers. And alliances shifted constantly. For a foreign-born queen, survival required more than courage. It required intelligence. Many royal women quickly learned the language and customs of their new court. They observed the politics around them and carefully built relationships with influential figures. Some formed alliances with powerful noble families. Others earned respect through diplomacy, generosity, or wisdom. Over time, certain royal women gained significant influence within the imperial household. Their role as mothers of royal children often strengthened their position. A son born to a queen from a defeated dynasty might one day inherit the throne, creating a powerful link between the old kingdom and the new empire. Through their children, these women shaped the future. In some cases, their influence helped protect the people of their homeland. They could advocate for mercy, negotiate better treatment for captured nobles, or encourage policies that stabilized newly conquered territories. Yet despite these opportunities, the emotional cost of their lives remained immense. Many royal women spent the rest of their lives far from the lands where they were born. The palaces, cities, and traditions they once knew were replaced by unfamiliar landscapes and foreign customs. Their memories belonged to a world that no longer existed. Still, Their presence in these imperial courts carried meaning. They were living reminders that empires were not built by force alone. They were shaped by diplomacy, alliances, and the quiet strength of individuals who adapted to extraordinary circumstances. The chronicles of conquerors often focused on battles and victories. But within the hidden chambers of royal courts, another story unfolded. A story of survival, a story of resilience, and a story of women who, despite losing their kingdoms, refused to lose their influence. When empires collapsed, history often recorded the names of the conquerors. Generals who led armies, kings who expanded their borders, warriors who burned cities and claimed victory. But the stories of the women who survived those conquests were rarely written with the same attention. And yet, their lives carried the deepest scars of imperial expansion. For many royal women, the fall of their kingdoms meant the complete transformation of their identity. A queen who once commanded servants and advisors could suddenly find herself living as a political hostage. A princess raised to inherit a throne might instead become part of a foreign royal household. Entire dynasties disappeared within a single generation. But these women did not simply vanish with them. Instead, they adapted to a new world. Inside imperial courts, many royal women quietly built new lives. They raised children who would inherit positions of power within the conquering empire. Through these children, the bloodlines of defeated kingdoms continued, even if the kingdoms themselves had disappeared. Over time, this blending of cultures reshaped entire civilizations. Royal families that once stood on opposite sides of brutal wars became connected through marriage and lineage. Traditions from conquered lands slowly entered the customs of expanding empires. Language, clothing, religious beliefs, and court rituals all began to mix. In this way, the legacy of fallen kingdoms did not disappear completely. It survived through people, through families, and often through the royal women who endured the aftermath of conquest. Yet the emotional weight of their lives remained immense. Many spent decades far from their homeland, never seeing the cities where they were born again. They lived surrounded by foreign traditions, foreign languages, and memories of a past that could never be restored. Their survival required strength that rarely appeared in the official histories written by conquerors. But modern historians have begun to look more closely at these overlooked figures. Because when we examine the rise and fall of empires, we begin to see something important. Empires were not built by armies alone. They were also shaped by families, alliances, and the quiet endurance of individuals forced to live through enormous political change. The royal women who survived conquest carried two worlds within them: the memory of the kingdoms they lost, and the reality of the empires they helped shape. Their lives remind us that history is not only about victories and defeats. It is also about survival. And sometimes, the people who leave the most powerful legacy are not the conquerors who claimed glory, but the survivors who rebuilt their lives after everything had fallen.